Okay, I'm back, and hopefully my microphone is working this time. Okay, so this welcome back. Today the plan is to go over a project that I've been working on for the last couple of weeks, which is a Discord bot for the SurrealDB server. I've done quite a few streams going on looking at SurrealDB in the past, and there'll be many more to come, especially as I'm working as intern there now. The plan for today is to do a very quick demonstration of how it works, and then to go through the code and explain how it works, well, the different things. So it's going to be a combination of Serenity and a bit of Surreal stuff, but there's sort of, this project has less on the actual database stuff because I'm basically just passing through, so it's kind of a proxy for it. And right, so it is currently let me switch over. It is currently live on the SurrealDB server, so you can play around with it. There's already been quite a few changes and extra features and refinements since the version that's on the server, and I will, once it's finished compiling, I can show you on the test server. But the way that it works is that there are slash commands, and not all of these. Well, some of these are for admin purposes, but the main ones are create and connect in terms of slash commands. So if you go create and you just great, okay. So I need to hopefully, right, let's try again. So this is on the well, a later version now. Right, so you see, if you use the create command, it will send you a message, and if you click on the link, so now I can write some queries. So let's say if let's just try that, and nothing, as you'd expect, but I can now I can create something. So I could do create bot, set name equals SurrealQL bot, and then I can do create person, set name equals Raphael, for example, and then hopefully, if I remember how to do this, then you can relate them. So let me just check that. So that's going to be, I can relate there we are. So there's a basic idea, and then another feature that we have is, let's say you want to query a pre-made data set, such the one that's available at the moment is the Surreal Deal, which is made by Alexander. So you can pass that as an option to create or connect, or you can use the load command, go to pre-made, and then select the different sizes that just have more different numbers of records. So you can see it just takes a second to load, and there's a nice diagram here which shows you the different things, and there'll be videos and blog posts and tutorials on the website explaining more about how that dataset works and how to query it, and explaining how the relations and the views work on all of these different elements, and then so you can apply those to your own use cases. And another thing that you can do is and at the moment this only I can see this, but what I can do is I can use the share command, and I can share it. You know, let's say if I wanted to ask somebody help, or I've done the cool thing, I could do that. Use the share command. Okay, cool. So that's the main functionality. It also allows you can right click, go under apps, and then go create DB thread, and then you can look under here, and then you basically have all the same functionality. The only difference here is that by default messages aren't passed as queries, because I found that when you were using threads, you were normally just, you know, talking a bit and then you wanted to alternate between them. So what you can do instead is you can do /query, and then you can add the query in that way. And that feature is available anywhere. The other advantage of that is if you hit the up arrow, then you can go and change your query, which I find really neat, because I find it annoying that if you just use messages normally, if I go and you press the up arrow, it edits the last message as opposed to being a new one, which is not how command and terminal things usually work. So that's another advantage of using the query thing. And if you want to change that, you can go /configure channel, and then you can change whether it's pretty printed, whether it's in JSON or SurrealQL, and whether it requires a query command. And then there are also defaults for that on a server level, which you can configure. Cool. Oh, and there's also an export command. Right. So that doesn't work in the production, but it does work in. So I need to sort that out. It does work locally. Not sure why that is. But the idea is, and I'll going to show you that a bit later, that basically there's a timeout, and when they time out, it exports it, or when you can get an export through that command. Okay, so hopefully that gives you an overview of how it's useful, and basically the use case is to try it out, and then the to try it out, and also to help with resolving issues, basically. And there'll be blog posts and videos directed more at explaining how the bot works. But as I say, the main things are that you use connect, allows you to do a database within an existing channel. Create creates a new channel, and then and then you can right click on messages to create an associated thread. Right, so then we're going to have and as Ali has said, I'm assuming that's how you pronounce your name, has made a PR for adding a localizer. So I mean, that might be an interesting thing. We can have a look at that later. Okay. Yeah, and she and a couple other people like Misha have been very helpful in testing and suggesting new features. So the chances are, if there's some neat trick, it was that we were playing around with it, and one of us realised, it should really work that way, and then we implemented that. Okay, let's have a look through the code now. So let me make this a bit bigger. Hopefully you can see that. So I think the way that I'll go through that, go through the code is start from main, follow the course of the code, see where things take us, and then go over how each of the commands work. If anybody has any questions, please ask them, and I can explain anything or any suggestions. Yeah, just fire away. Okay, so in the main is fairly straightforward. The first thing that we do is import environment variables, because that's how the configuration is done. It was originally done with TOML files, but doing Docker stuff, it's a lot easier with environment variables. So there's the main thing that you need is the Discord token, which allows you to connect to Discord and connect to the bot. And then there's also a couple other option things. So you can optionally pass a path to store the configuration, which is stored in a SurrealDB instance. And you can either do that in memory or in RocksDB, whether you want it persistent or not. And then we just set that up to use the namespace and database. And then we get these token from the environment. And then there's some configuration that we need to do for Discord itself. So the gateway intents are basically what you tell Discord what you actually need to do. They sort of clamp down on things that a lot of bots can't read messages at all, and they can only respond to / commands. But we want to be able to, so you need to specify that. And so you pass the token, the intents in, and then you give it an event handler, and then that's basically it. Now this event handler, let me go to have a look. This is the main thing where everything comes out from. So basically anytime anything happens on the server, or an event will be triggered, and if there is an appropriate event handler, it will be passed appropriate information. So let me collapse these so we can just see the different kinds. So there are loads of in Discord and in the Serenity docs. There are loads of different things that you can have for event handlers, but the 4 that we've got are message, ready, interaction create, and guild create. So we'll just go through what they. We'll look at ready first, because that's the one that you start. Basically, what that does is when it gets triggered when the bot connects. So you can see we print out that it's connected, and then you have to register the commands, because Discord needs to know what the name and all the other details of the command is, so it can show them. And because there's a lot of them, I've split that out into another module, and there's a function that does all of it. Serenity works on a lot of builders, so most functions take a closure which then has a builder which you do all the things on. So which makes it rather convenient, so I can just pass that in. And these are guild commands, so they're registered for each guild individually. And then I also have basically the same thing on guild create, which is oddly named. It doesn't actually mean when you make a guild, it's when you add the bot to a guild. A guild is a server. That's the terms in the API are kind of different from some of the public-facing things, and I think that's just because they're older and they didn't want to change them. So there's some archaic things. The guild is the main one. Anyway, so that just means that if the bot is running and you add it to a new server, it will add the commands. And then for the interactions, those are the / commands or the right-clicking. It basically just does a match on the name of the command, and then it runs the appropriate function. This is the kind of thing I think would be really would be interesting to do a stream on macros, because there's a lot of this kind of thing where it's the same thing a whole bunch of times, just with 2 words swapped out each time around. But basically it just matches and then it dispatches to that particular function. And then what message does is, and this is triggered for every message, what it will do is it will get a it will check to see if it begins with a comment, because if you might want to include that, and then it checks to see whether there is a database instance associated with the channel that you're sending the message in. So the way that it does that is so dbcons. What is that? So that's defined here. So it's static, using lazy static, which is very, very neat. Basically, the static means that it's one place in memory and that we can access it from anywhere in the program. And it has a mutex, needs to be in a mutex, because we have lots of different threads that can be accessing it, and we don't want to cause don't want to be memory unsafe. Though that did cause lots of problems, because at various points I've had deadlocks and other weird things, so they need to keep that in mind. And it holds a hash map from U64 to a connection, which you can see here holds a database connection, when it was last used, which is used for the timeout, the connection type, which is not actually used at the moment, the how long it has to live, and the time to live, whether it should be pretty printed, whether it uses JSON, whether it requires query. So when that is what's changed by that configure channel that I was command that I was doing before. So basically, this is information about how the how that particular query should function, as opposed to here we can see the DB, which maybe should be better named, but anyway, which holds configuration information about a whole server, which serves as the defaults for the individual channel ones. Anyway, so what we do is we lock that and await, because we're using Tokyo mutexes, and then we do a get mute with the channel ID of the message as U64, because that's the type that we have. And we need it to be mutable because we want to update when it was last used. Ooh. Thank you. Oh, I forgot to. When I was setting up the stream, it didn't work the first time, and I forgot to change everything the second time around. Hopefully the link works now. Andy, thank you. Because I used a template, so it was that was the last thing I was streaming on, which was also using SurrealDB. But yeah, okay. So it gets a mutable reference, and then if we need the query command, then we just return. But the thing you have to be careful with mutexes is that if you have a match or an if-let, then the lock is held for the entirety of the block that is within it. So even if you did something like if let some con equals await dot get whatever, right, and you're doing whatever in there, that that reference will be held the whole way through. And so if what was happening in an earlier version of the code is that's when the query would be executed. And so that meant that you were holding the lock for a really long time and it would just screw everything up. So this is why now we clone, not really cloning the database because that's going to be behind an arc, so it's pretty cheap. And then that's how we get the connection. But you have to do that, and that means that you're only holding the lock for a very short amount of time. Okay. And then we want to... I've just got this validate message, which I think is... I don't know why I wrote it like that. That's rather very verbose way of writing it, which could just be one line. But that just checks if it's a bot. So basically, if it is a bot, we just want to ignore it. Otherwise, I got an infinite loop because it gives the result from the database and then tries to query the database with that, and it just is a mess. Okay, so you need to make sure that it doesn't respond to bots. And then we want to get the we just pass the content of that message into the database as a query, and then we wait for that. And then there's this function called process here, which basically does a bunch of things to unpack them and then formats them in various ways, and that's just copied out of the CLI. So the way that it's displayed in Discord is basically how it looks at the CLI, which is nice. Okay, and then we just turn that into a string, and then we just respond. So why? I don't know. That's very odd. Okay. There we are. Okay, so what respond does is one of the problems with Discord. One of the limitations, something you need to keep in mind, is that there's a limit on the size of messages, which is 2,000 Unicode points. Which I suppose is pretty reasonable. You don't want to be sending War and Peace in the whole message. It's not really practical. So what we need to do is we need to check if it's too long, and also we want to do some formatting. So if it's JSON, it'd be nice to have some highlighting, and if it's SurrealQL, it would be nice to have some highlighting as well, though it's not quite perfect because it doesn't have support for SurrealQL, so we use SQL, which is pretty similar. So what we do is if it's less than 1900, just giving us a bit of wiggle room, if it's less than that, very easy. We just print it with the backticks with either JSON or SQL. Yes, but I don't know if a bot can be Nitro. I don't know how that works. But anyway, it doesn't really matter because let me, as you, I can't see them here, but you can see this is how it looks like. So it still gives you a preview, and you can still see most of it. So it's very, you'd probably want something like this anyway if it was longer than that. And if you really want all of it, then you can download it. So yeah. One thing that you will notice is there's a lot of unwraps everywhere, which is not ideal. I have been working on that, and there's some annoying things about the way that Discord works, which makes the error handling a bit trickier. But it does need to be improved. I'll explain that in a bit. Right. Sorry. So if we do send it as a file, there's also a file limit. So what? It's 25 megabytes default, and that goes up to 100 megabytes if you're well on the SurrealDB server, because it has the max nitro stuff. But I'm not sure if I really want to be sending 100 megabyte files anyway. So this seems like a reasonable limit, and it's easy to change, so we might even reduce that. But basically, if it's less than or equal to that, then we do the... I know you could do this in the if, I just like the way that match statements look, so I tend to favor them. Basically, we just... and the way that the file upload works is that you have a bunch of different options, one of which is just bytes, so a slice of U8s. So we just get the bytes. Or if it's bigger than that, then we split it at the max file size, so we just get that many, which is probably fine. If you're dealing with that much data, you should really do it yourself. Do it on your local thing anyway. Okay. Yeah, and then we just need to package it, and we want to add JSON or SQL again, so we get the nice highlighting, and then we send that in a message. And you can see here in the send message, the sort of the message content takes a closure, which has a builder. So we add the file, and if it was truncated, we just mention that. Okay, let's go back to. Oh, I must have imported that by accident. Right. Yeah, so that and respond does that. It does all of that processing, so we don't need to worry about it. Okay, so that's what happens on message. Now, that's all of them. Cool. So that's what the event handler does. So now the big thing is, well, how do all of these commands work? So let's go through them. So the first, there's a couple different kinds of commands. There's the admin commands. So there's the configuration commands, there's the sort of cleaning commands, and then for the users, there's the commands that make a database instance, let's say, and then there are commands that you want to use once you have it. So these are just arranged in the order that I use them. It might be nice to separate them out a bit. But let's go through them in that order. So first, let's look at configure, which is here. So the way that all of the way that all of the commands work is that there's a register function and a run function. Oh yeah, and let me that's odd. Anyway, so basically, again, very repetitive thing that just registers all of them. That's funny. Anyway, yeah. So register just again, we have we take a closure, and we just do we need name, description, and then the permissions. So the admin permissions. At the moment, I've just done manage channels. I might do some other things for now. And then because all of the different options for configuration are needed in multiple places, I have a separate command with all of those. So the first one is active, which is where the channels are created when you use the create command. Then we have an archive category for when they time out. we have the time to live for channels before they're archived and the database is deleted. We have the timeout, that's how long each query can be executed for. And then we have whether to pretty print it, which is basically whether it's all in a straight line or whether it has the nice returns, and then whether to be in JSON or SurrealQL. Just sort of other, so you can have it in one place. And then when it runs, it gets the it sees whether there's an existing configuration. At when I initially wrote this, you can only have you can only use the configure channel to do the initial configuration, and you can only do a config update once it's already configured. You might be able to you could probably make the configure command work instead of even when there's an existing configuration. The main difference is that configure requires each field is mandatory, whereas in config update you could just have you don't have to include all of them. You can just include the ones you want to change. Sorry. Yeah, a lot of this code might be cleaned up, as Annie mentioned. There's a lot of prints, and also some of these things are sort of what I was experimenting. But basically the way that it works is if there's already a configuration, then we error, we say that we've already got a configuration, and if there's nothing already, then we're good. So basically the way that Discord sends you an object that has all of the things in it, but you don't know the order. So as you can see, initially I was basically asserting and trying to check what the names were and relying on the order. But what I ended up doing, which also means that it's easy to put the it's easy to do the update, is let me have a look at if we go to config. So for config contains all of those fields that I just went over before, and then what I have is a config builder, which has all of the same fields except they're all optional. So what that means is that I can construct a config builder from the arguments, and the way that works is it just iterates over every option, every parameter that was passed, and then it just matches the name, and then it sets it to that. And then once I have that, if I'm in config update, I can merge them. So I can take the existing configuration, and then I want to say wherever there's some new configuration, I want to override the old one. Or I can say I want to turn this builder into a full configuration, and then it will error if there's it will error if one of them's none. So you can see here in the merge, we just, again, very repetitive, but we say if there is an active channel in the one to add, then we override it. Do the same for each one. And then the builder, love the question mark syntax, we just add we can just add a question mark on each one, so it returns an option, a config, and then if they're all there, then it all works. But this should always work, because we tell Discord that those commands are required, and Discord won't let you send a command if one of them is missing. So it shouldn't be a problem, but you can handle that gracefully. Yeah, so that's how the configuration is managed. And as you might have seen, there's I've just got a lot of helper functions. So, for example, this one, these are to reply to interactions. Normally, to do the content, to send a message, you need to have a closure that acts as a builder and all of that. In fact, you need to have two nested to give the actual content. And as I was doing a lot of the same things, just have a helper function that just passes text in. Okay, and then it just tells you what the configuration is. So I think that's fairly straightforward. And then the config update is basically the same thing, except it builds it, and instead of turning it into a full configuration, it merges it with the existing configuration. Cool. So that's how the configuration works. Let's have a look at create. So the first thing that this does is it checks to make sure that you're actually in a guild, that it's not a private message. You shouldn't be able to use it as a private message anyway, but we need to make sure of that. And then we want to get the configuration in the server, because we need to use that as the defaults for the connection configuration. And if there isn't one, then this is using Surreal, and this is one of the nice things about it, is that we can specify a record directly as this tuple of the table and the ID, and because the config struct implements serialize and deserialize, we get it out of the database just like that, basically. So we get a result and an option, and so it's very easy, which is one of the really nice things about Surreal. Especially if you're doing in Rust, you just slap your types on with a serialize and deserialize, and then it's easy. So you don't even have to think about it. And I might be adding more features in there anyway, but at the moment it's just the config. So once we've got the config, we need to set the permissions. So basically what we do is we deny view to everyone, and then we make sure that the person who created it and the bot can see it. And then we use Serenity. You has a create channel, and just found this library that just creates random 3-letter combinations, because originally just picked a number from somewhere and it's really confusing. So hopefully that works. So yeah, it just creates dash separated 3 words, making a text channel, and then we put it into the category that we get from the configuration. And then we have create a database instance, which just sets creates a new in-memory database instance with Surreal, and then gives it the config, which at the moment is just the timeouts, which I actually had to do a PR to get to work, and then it just defaults using test namespace and database. Okay, and then and then all of this code is to deal with the fact that you can, when you create a channel, you can just create it raw, so with nothing, no data loaded in. You can just play around with it as much as you want. You can load a pre-made data set at the moment that Alexander has made, or you can upload your own SurrealQL file. So that's basically headless. So we look at the number of options that have been passed, and I don't think there's a way in the Discord in Discord to say you're only allowed to have this option or this option. There may be a way, I haven't been able to figure it out. So if you've passed 2, just error, say please only do 1. And then if there's 1, then that's what we want, and if there's none, then that's also fine, and we just continue with that. So if now this code is what I did initially and is rather verbose and rather repetitive, this is in some of the other places where I have similar functionality, it's refactored in a nicer way. But basically the way that it works is if it's a string, that means it's one of the pre-made ones. So at the moment we have SurrealDeal and SurrealDeal Mini. And the first thing we do is we reply saying the data is loading. Then we need to clone the database because we're going to spawn another process. So it doesn't block the rest of the stuff, because this can happen in parallel. And that sends messages in those databases, and then it imports the file, which is just stored there. And then we send, there's a lovely image that Alexander made which details the schema, so then we send that as well. And then this one is exactly the same with just a different file. So this is basically, this spawn process just says in the channel that it's being loaded, then it loads it, and then when it's done, it says that. And then attachment is a similar thing, except here what we do is we wait to download the file, and then once it's downloaded we do the same things. We need to clone the database because we're going to move them, and the channel and other things. And then here we do query instead of import, so we don't have to write it to disk. But it's all basically the same thing. And then we just say when it's done, basically, and notify them. Cool. So this is a lot of this is just handling different cases, and then I say once that's done. But if you're loading a database or submitting a file in parallel to that, then we register the database. So what this does is it adds it to dbcons, which is that static hash map behind a mutex. So we just insert it, and then we create a process to time out the database when it's done. So the way that it works is it just has an infinite loop, and it will look at it will get the connection, so it can see when it was last used, how long it has to live, and then once it's got that, it will look at the time elapsed since the last command, the last query was done on the database. And if that's longer than the time to live, then it will clean the channel. And if not, then it will sleep until when that time is. So that's, I think at the server at the moment we have it set to 6 hours. So basically it just sleeps and then it checks, oh, have you used it since then? And if you have, then it just sleeps again. So the clean channel basically cleans up various admin stuff. So the first thing that it does is it removes the connection from dbcons from that hash map. And if it was there, then it will say a message. It will do a database export, so either in just temp or you can in the environment you can pass a path. And then it will export to that path, and then it will send that in a message, and then it will delete the file afterwards. That's in case you were working on something, you don't lose it if it timed out and then you slept or whatever. And then what you can do is you can just download that, and then you can use the load command to resume. Errors. And then here it will archive if it's a channel. It will archive it if that's appropriate, or if it's a thread, it will set the thread to be archived. Yeah. So, and then that functionality is basically the same for the others. Create DB thread is a bit simpler because you can't pass options to sort of right-click interaction command type things. So it just does all the creation stuff, just registers it basically. And then the other one, connect, is basically the same, except it doesn't create the it doesn't create a channel. It uses the existing channel that you're in, but it just does create the database and registers it, and it does allow you to load things. And then load is basically the same thing as connect, except that it doesn't create a database. It uses the existing database and just allows you to load pre-made data sets or a file in. And you can see here I've got this nice load pre-made function, which basically means I don't have to copy all of that stuff over. Okay, so those are the commands that show you how to create a database instance, and load is one that allows you to add more stuff to it once you've got one. And then you can use query, which basically does the same thing in the message handler. It just looks at the interaction, gets the query out of it, passes it to the database instance, and then responds to that. So reasonably straightforward. And then and again updates the last use, so it doesn't time out. And what it will do is it will do the initial response that tells you the query, so you can see what it is, and then it replies to that message with the result from the database. And you can also do queue, so you don't. I mean, it auto completes anyway, but I thought that would be nice. That is just an alias. It just directs to the other function. Then export. Don't know why I can't find export. It's right there. I think that's probably a glitch with Rust Analyzer. Anyway, so this does similar things that we saw in the cleaning. It makes a path, uses the export on the database, and then it uploads the file here. and then you can see all the different ways that things could go wrong. And then at the end it removes the file. So you don't clutter things up. And then yes, and then there's configure channel. So this allows you to change some settings, and this is not anybody can use this. This basically switches on and off the message, whether messages are passed as queries or whether you have to use the query / command, and what format you want the response in. So what this does is it just iterates over all of them, and for each one it just sets the appropriate one. One of the things about Serenity is you have to do a lot of sort of burrowing down to actually get what people have said, which is a bit annoying. But these maybe not a bit ideal, but these unwraps should be guaranteed by Discord, because if we look down here, we specify the types here. So that should be shouldn't be a problem. Famous last words. Yeah. Okay. Good. So you can specify those there. And then you have channels for cleaning. So the clean basically just runs the clean channel function on the channel that you called it in, and clean all does all of them, which is useful because if you shut down the process running the bot, it's gonna delete everything. So if you do clean all, then it will export everybody's stuff, which is nice. So that's the main sort of bulk of the code. Hopefully that makes sense. So yeah, please try it out on the Discord server. I hope it's helpful. Feel free to message me if you have any questions. There'll be some more content coming out on it soon. Or if you have any suggestions, feel free to add issues or do PRs. Misha and Ali have already done some, so thank you very much for that. Yeah, I think that's the main event. I hope it's helpful. There'll be lots more. They've got some more projects coming down the pipe, both to help people use SurrealDB, and then also just making some cool things with it and helping that. So stay tuned, and I hope that was interesting, and I'll see you soon. Thank you very much.